Hi, everybody. I don't know if anyone's here. It's Coe Leta and Nicole from IDEO. Happy Thursday. I don't think anybody's here yet, so that's fine.
Okay, good.
So we'll start our morning off slow. So it's pretty normal.
What do you see here?
Yeah,
When you know.
We'll see people come in, and it's gonna take at least 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
And so we can tell stories. We can as people start to show up, I'll ask them to put their say who's here.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the guidance.
So let's see. What is any story highlights from this week on any of your projects or teams? One of my favorite things going on, and we have some people showing up. Hi. We'll get started in a bit. We're going to start at about 5 or 10 after as more people show up. So Nicole and I will do intros at that point. So we'll just chat for a little bit. Nicole doesn't know this yet too, but you know about the leadership panel. So Owen and Chris and Ilya have been meeting with us on Fridays to review and share commentary, and they love it. They can't get enough of it. It's become their favorite part of the week. And so we have Em here to my right. She's hiding off camera, but we'll introduce her too. So one of my favorite highlights was Chris talking about how he gets to good questions. And so he shared stories of how he'll take someone's question and then ladder it up a couple levels to he'll expand it out to what they were intending. So most people ask questions very close in to something that's near and dear, and so he has a strategy for how he ladders it up, and he was really articulate, as Chris is.
Yes.
And so that was one of my favorite highlights, was just listening to Chris talk about his craft of how he helps get to better questions.
That's great.
Yeah. Any highlights for you this week on anything?
I'm about to start a project that is my favorite kind of design challenges are the ones where there's a question and you have no idea how to solve it. Those are the ones I love. I love when you can start a design challenge and actually not know what the answer is, because you have to trust the design process and kind of design your way towards it. But that said, it's the hardest projects to begin.
It is.
So we're trying to frame our questions and think about how are we going to do research to be inspired in appropriate ways. So we're in that in the funny zone of like who are these experts in a space that is a little ambiguous, and is actually where the question itself is okay. You know, you kind of this is good enough for us to get going, because we're gonna, once we start going broad and doing our research, we're gonna revisit that question several times again and
probably keep modifying it slightly.
You got it.
Yep. Yeah, that's exciting. I love that you get excited. I love that
too. For better or worse, I do love to design.
So many of you are arriving, some of you we expect more, and so we'll start it in about 5 minutes, but I would love to welcome those of you who are here. So I see Rob. For those of you who don't know, on the left-hand side of your screen, you should see, this is backwards, I realize, but you should see a little blue box that says Q&A, and you click on that. That should trigger a question stream on the right side of your screen where you can then add in questions, and we would love to hear where you're coming from. So some of you might be having difficulty getting in, and we expect that. It takes a moment to get things going. But if you can, look for the Q&A button on the left. And Rob, if you can weigh in for me, is that where you found it? We've learned that it's a couple different, can be a couple locations. Oh, look at this. Nicole is talented in writing.
Almost. Almost.
We're gonna write it backwards. So good. Hello from Istanbul.
Welcome.
Welcome, definitely. And so for some of you, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. For us, it's 9 o'clock in the morning here in the lovely city of San Francisco. And you can't see it, but we are near the waterfront. So our offices look out over the water, and it's a beautiful, beautiful spring, summerish morning here in San Francisco. It is. So again, for those of you joining in, all right, Woo-Jin, thank you. Oh, look at that. Oh, Nicole is so talented. So talented. Look for this blue Q&A symbol on the left, and it's how you can then join the question stream and start to ask questions. And we'll start with a few questions from the course. But what I'd love for you to do too is, it is the square blocks. Thank you, Rob. So the other symbol, we've learned there's 2 ways to get into the question stream. For some of you, it might be the Q&A that Nicole just showed. For others, there's a grid of 3x3 blocks that look like this in the upper part of your screen. So look for either one of these symbols to join the question thread. And once you get in, I would love to hear where you're from. So hello, Anna from Costa Rica, and Kate. Kate, where are you from? New York, NYC.
New York City. 90 degrees today. Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Summer.
Total summer.
Sounds actually pretty nice.
Istanbul, Germany. What time is it in Germany? It's pretty late.
Probably 9 hours?
Yeah.
6 p.m. I guess.
Oh, dinner time?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Anna. So one of the things, as we're still waiting for a few people to show up, is I'd love to hear a leadership, like a moment for you in your history at IDEO that was a defining moment for you as a leader. If there's anything that comes to mind, or a moment or a person that inspired or helped you get there.
For me personally, I guess there was one early on in my career. I had a fantastic guide, actually Neil Stevenson, who you know really well, who's really fun, a nice, fun, irreverent Brit. But I was working on a project that was really hard, and our guides have different modes of interacting with teams here. Some of them kind of come in once a week and do a design review. There's a few dreaded guides who do the affectionately known swoop and poop, come in for an hour and tell you everything is awful, and then they leave. But Neil was in it with me, and we were co-creating together.
It's good that way.
And in a way that got me to places I couldn't get to myself, and was fun and inspiring. And I think as an experience that really has shaped how I like to now guide myself with teams. So I always say I'm not here to review, I'm here to co-create with you. So I'm on research, so I'm hearing stories firsthand. I'm in there during synthesis, so I'm helping to shape that. And with respect, I'm not taking over, I'm letting the team do their thing. But I would much rather be seen as a team member, as a form of leadership, as someone who's doing the dreaded swoop and poop. So that's for me. That's wonderful.
And see, and aren't we both lucky to have had people in our organization who can model that, and now we model that for a lot of our people. And it is so important that you as the leader are doing the exact behaviors that you are looking to grow in the people that you mentor and skill up. Yeah. It's not always easy.
It's not easy.
But it's good too, and I know that we all hold each other accountable for that too. Like, you will be found out if you.
It's true.
Don't. Why don't we
get started?
Let's do intros. Nicole, tell me about yourself. Who are you?
Hi, Nicole Kahn here. I'm the director of the Design for Change studio here in our San Francisco office, and we are all focused on making organizations more purpose-driven, more innovative, and growing the world's creative capacity, both individuals, institutions, and society at large. I've been here at IDEO for about 7 years, and I do a lot of teaching at the D School. And I'm one of the people who helped create this course. So Tim and I spent many hours together figuring out what were the core essential lessons we want to teach and how to teach them. So very happy to be here.
And we're so happy to have you. And I know Nicole is also in the course, so you'll see her show up in the course, and she's also actively working with a lot of teams right now every day. So so hello to a few more people who are joining. So Tyler from South Dakota, and David, so people from my neck of the woods. I'm from Minnesota. Hello. And John from Dublin. Well, all the way, Suze would be happy. So our dean, Suzanne Gibbs Howard, is a big fan of the Irish. So hello, I'm Coe Leta Stafford, and I'm a senior design director here at IDEO, and I've been leading creative teams since 2006, across a lot of different organizations. And similar to Nicole, I was very passionate about not just creating innovations, but helping people become innovators. How do you teach the skills? How do you foster growth? And so I also help design some of the courses for IDEO U. So I lead our Insights course and just continue to be really passionate about supporting and fostering all of you. And as Nicole can attest, we are so inspired and impressed by the level of questions and the level of participation in the course. So thank you. We are here for you, and we're really excited to dive into some questions. Again, if you've just joined, there are 2 ways to join the question grid, and then we'll start answering some questions. Look for one of these symbols, either this one on the top or that one on your left. It's blue. It says Q&A. And from there, you can then start to ask questions. And we would love for you to share where you are from. And I have one quick question, and we're going to show you to Havens, who is also part of the teaching team, is here. Hello. So she's joining in. I have a quick question for you. Are we scrolling up or down? Do you know if the newest goes to the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So why don't we?
Should we start?
Yeah, let's start. Do you want to?
Shall I read the?
Yeah, read the ones.
The first question. So this comes from Kevin DeBell, Associate Director of the EPA. He was building upon another question, and he was particularly interested on how do we demonstrate the effectiveness of these types of approaches IDEO is teaching in order to maintain support for them within the organization. Are there metrics or ways of demonstrating the value of more creative approaches that you can recommend? Which is a great question, and probably a pretty big question.
It's the biggest one.
It wasn't the one I think we maybe want to start with, but we're warmed up.
Exactly. Let's
and I think it's interesting to think about, we're teaching you skills as leaders of how do you build your capabilities, but clearly the thing we aren't talking about as explicitly is the backdrop of that. If you're working within an organization and you're inevitably trying to stoke change there. We do a lot of that work within our studio, and that's years in the making. But that said, I think there's some small things you can look at from the other direction. This is almost more, in some cases, can be the bottoms-up approach as opposed to that top-down approach. One of the things we like to talk about is to do small things and tell big stories. That you are starting a movement in some ways through this bottoms-up approach. You're trying out new processes, you're coming up with new ideas, and you're getting evidence of success. And they may be small, because we often tell you to start with something that you know will be a win for the organization, start with a small challenge, but point to that and shout it from the rooftops. Look at this new way of working, look at this new kind of result, and we need to do more of that. That actually starts to create a groundswell and some support.
So I want to give one example of that.
Please.
So I love that. Was it Small Things, Big Stories?
Yeah.
So we did a project with the San Francisco Unified School District schools to help them redesign their school food experience. And it was less about what we designed for them, but more about introducing them to a process for how they can innovate within their system. And one of my favorite indicators of them showing progress and kind of adopting these changes was about 6 months after our engagement ended, the head of the nutritional services said that they were going to have a planning day, strategic planning day. And usually that's where they then sit around a bunch of Excel sheets and menus and kind of decide where can we improve or optimize. And instead, she said, I sent all of my employees out to have lunch with the kids in the spaces at the schools. Mm-hmm. And she said the effect of it was, and so that's one of the key things of being close to your core customer. She said the effect was all of her team felt more invested in the decisions being made. Mm-hmm. And her as the leader, it helped distribute the challenges that she was facing because her team had a new perspective on how to help participate in those challenges. Mm. So I love that. And she sent it to me as an email. Again, it was 6 months. We were nowhere in the relationship at that point. So I look for those clues of where do you see people taking initiative or doing things differently that they haven't done before.
Yeah, and it may be, I think organizations are trained to look at like quantitative evidence or quantitative results. For some of this larger scale change efforts, it's actually want to go the other way. It's like, what are the qualitative indicators you can start to see? And you'll see more of this in the third course, where we're encouraging you to start experimenting and trying things. And one of the things you might simply be measuring is how many things are we trying? Because when you are working in new ways, there's no guarantee they will work. We want to make sure we're encouraging the behaviors that we're at least experimenting and learning.
Yeah. And we can keep coming back to this question, and
That's a big one.
we've already Nicole already sent this one to Tim as well.
I did.
You? so
we're getting people to think in big ways, which is exciting.
It is exciting, and I think that one's going to keep coming up, and we can keep revisiting that one. I'm going to ask, for those of you joining, we would love more questions. So again, if you aren't in the question stream, and hello Bastian from Switzerland, feel free to tell us where you're from and start asking us some of the questions. And in particular, we would love to hear anything related to this first week in the course. So lesson 1, all around leading with a strong point of view and purpose and vision, and how you frame challenge questions for your creative and practice creative leadership. So, but we can take things beyond that as well. If you don't know how to ask questions, again, and this is the last time I'm going to do it. Make sure you join the grid. Look for this grid or the Q&A button, and then you'll be able to join the question stream. And with that, I'm going to jump to the question from
Rashi. Talk about it.
Let's see. Oh, that one. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is from Rashi in Sunnyvale, California, and this question comes from in the course under the panel. We have a discussion thread. We've asked many of you to put your questions there, and then some of you have upvoted. So this is one that many of you were curious about. 2 big questions: how to continually inspire people to remain curious, hungry, and drive innovation, and how to remain curious when people around you don't have the same priorities. So I'll start with, without a doubt, there's big and small strategies that you can implement here. So I'm going to start with a small one, and we can go from there. So one thing, I call it the airplane, make sure you put on your oxygen mask first.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be a creative leader to others, you have to be taking care and nourishing your creative needs. And so one of the ways that I do that is by pairing up with some people that feed that in me. So, and I know, Nicole, you do this too. There are certain people. So one of the ways to best stay nourished and be that, and to stay curious around you, even if the main part of your culture is not that way, is to find the 1 or 2 people who can sustain that in you. And yeah, that's why you put your gas mask on before you can help others. So I'm curious, who do you find inspiring? Who can you get closer to? How can you support each other at minimum to at least be, like, for example, one of my colleagues, Suzanne, and I, we have a weekly meeting, and it could easily be taken over by all of the logistics that we need to deal with that week, but we preserve time to inspire each other. We ask, what are you passionate about this week? Where do you need help to execute better or to be more creative? So we strategically use our relationship to make sure we're fostering that. And then as an effect, we model that more for our team when we come out of those moments.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one small strategy.
Yeah, this reminds me of a few years ago, we were working with a client, and we were trying to improve the quality of innovation coming out of this big organization. And we had realized that every time we brought our senior leaders together, it was for these go, no-go decisions at like a stage gate process.
Okay.
And it's a shame you have all these amazing leaders and they're only there to make a decision without any of the context. And one of the things we started doing is instituting monthly inspiration meetings. So once a month, we invited leaders from across the various divisions and silos of the organization to come hear, 10 amazing food trends that week. We would sometimes give them a little homework. We were starting to dig into the millennial, so they had to go, hang out on Twitter and see why everyone's following Justin Bieber, and talk to their kids about what's interesting to them, and bring those stories as a means of also inspiration. So encouraging them to kind of get to know customers themselves, but also just hosting them in a very different context. They didn't get to share their ideas on some of these future innovations. They were just there to make a decision. Our hunch being, if we were bringing them in much earlier on the process to stoke that inspiration, that it would benefit everyone around them, and hopefully these new products and getting to market.
Yeah. I also want to mention we'll cover more of this in lesson 2 as well.
Yes.
Do you want to say a few things about lesson 2?
Yes, yeah, lesson 2. I know a few folks already. I saw a few people already commenting. Lesson 2 focuses completely on how to lead from behind through culture. So while you may not always be able to control the culture of your organization at large, you have a lot of control of the culture within your team. So we'll get into what are the essential beliefs and behaviors that are essential to creative teams. I think that might also serve as a really nice starting point to think about this.
I'll add one other thing in terms of how to continually inspire people to remain curious and hungry. So we have another team here at IDEO that launched a assessment tool called Creative Difference, and it's all around assessing, and you know this well because it spawned out of Design for Change. We had a lot of organizations that would ask us, how well or how innovative ready are we? How strong how strong is our creative culture? So Creative Difference is an assessment tool that everyone in your organization can take to understand where are you strong, where are you weak when it comes to nurturing creativity and being creatively competitive. Mm-hmm. And there's 6 metrics. Like, for example, one of them is around your appetite and your processes around experimentation, which Nicole mentioned. And one of the ones that's very commonly talked about is looking out. What ways is your organization set up to look out and be inspired and constantly fueled outside of your organization? And our colleague Dave Aiken, who runs this group, would say, without a doubt, that's one of the ones that a lot of organizations struggle with.
Yeah.
Even us at times, and we're known to be human-centered. So I think that's one of the most important things that's often overlooked is where are you making investments in, and just even small time or a large amount of time to keep looking outside of your organization for inspiration and how you're working. So
yeah, our project teams structure in many ways, but it actually, when you're not on a project, it's not necessarily structured in your life, so you have to be pointed about that.
I love that. Yeah.
I see a course question.
I like that one too.
The top one from Kathy.
Yeah, let's go there.
I think this just came in from the chat window, I think. So this one is regarding challenge questions. I find myself just rewording the initial question. Do you have any advice on how to make the challenge question more insightful? Which is great. I think I'll start it and maybe you go for it in there.
Go for it. Yeah.
Sometimes when you think about a challenge question, it's its own brainstorm where you're actually trying to think about different ways into that challenge. So I think in the course there's hunter-gatherer, which is one of the examples that they use where they're trying to improve food safety in China. Well, there's so many sub-challenges to that.
Yeah.
There's what does that mean for brand? What does that mean for supply chain? What does that mean for the customers involved? What does that mean for the food experience and the packaging? And so when I'm trying to think about challenges, I sometimes like to draw a box, of the challenge at hand and really think about, the really diverse ways to get at that. So if this is, food safety in China, I'm coming at it here from packaging. I'm coming at it here from supply chain. I'm coming at it here from consumers. So rather than rewording, which is kind of a narrowing focus, you can always get the words right. It's actually, to me, more interesting for you to go wide about the different inroads there. Because you'd like a challenge to be able to generate not just one kind of derivative idea, but many different kinds. And sometimes just the act of writing over and over again different versions of that, I find really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. And that is the truth too, like you rewrite. So another lens is very similar to this. I'm gonna use your drawing. You'll often see there are questions that have been asked over and over out in the world. Like one that I'm gonna use another school example. We often hear in schools or different public organizations, we'll do schools. The question comes up, how might we design curriculum to be more project-based or student-centered? Mm-hmm. So we hear that question a lot, and yet it's still getting asked, it's still a challenge people are trying to answer. So once I have a question that's common or I'm kind of stuck, I think about what are the underlying challenges of why this still hasn't been solved. Mm-hmm. And it's similar to this. And so like for the school example, why it still hasn't been solved is something like incentives may not be tied to promoting that to happen. So then I can start to think about, okay, how might we redesign incentives to support more project-based learning? So look for the underlying problems that continue to be the reason why that problem hasn't been solved yet. Yep. And then that helps you think about other ways to frame the question. And to your point too, rewriting, and I think I'm fascinated constantly by a single word, a single choice word can completely reframe and re-inspire. So for example, Tim Brown, as you know, at IDEO, our purpose has for many, many years been impact through design. And recently, in the past few years, he's added this very choice word of disproportionate impact through design. And a single word, it shifts how you think about it. It shifts the range of ways of focus and how you think about it. So a single good verb, a single good adjective within this a very normal, simple question can elevate it and take it in a new direction.
And I think there's also some words in the spirit of that I see a lot. I think I was looking at some folks' homework that I find to be not super inspiring. Like, how do I convince people? How do I educate people? Those don't feel like you've really opened up the design challenge in ways. And I actually see from Tanya, I think this Tanya in Seattle, this is related. She said, I've identified 3 problems, I'm assuming 3 challenges maybe. I'm not sure which one to work on first. Actually, maybe that's a different question. But I'll get to that one in a second. If you think about your challenge, and this is the way I pressure test it, when someone comes to me as a challenge, I put it in my brain and I'm like, can I instantly think about 5 to 10 radically different ideas for that? And when we're in the land of convincing someone or educating someone, it doesn't do it for me. I'm like, oh, that's pamphlets and that's campaigns, but that isn't the same as, how might I bring people along on a journey to better understand this? That's okay. Well, now I'm co-creating with them. I'm mentoring them. That's a different space. Go ahead.
And building on that, I think, Tanya, you as a creative leader, another way to choose which of those is to vet them around, share them around with other people on your team, other colleagues you trust, and find out where the heat is. Where do you see people getting excited to want to follow you and work on that question with you? I think is a great way to vet the effectiveness of where to start.
And sometimes with the challenges we start, that goes back to what Coe and I were talking about in the beginning about do small things, tell big stories. Where is the organization going to have energy to want to solve this, and where can you start what can give you momentum? So where do you have stakeholders excited to dig into these challenges and be along in that journey, and where will people thank you for doing it and want you to tackle more? That's another way of looking at it.
So thank you, Tanya. That was Tanya. Yeah, that was a great question.
Should we go to number 3?
Sounds good. Oh, I love this one.
Okay, you read it.
I'll read it. Yes, I like this one too. What are the key skills for becoming a creative person in today's organizations, and how to demonstrate the need for creative behaviors in these very much business-centric environments? So this is related to the metrics question. So again, I'm going to start with the creative difference, which I already mentioned. Oh, sorry, can you see that again? I have 2 things. Let me think this through a moment.
Okay.
Do you have an initial?
Well, I'll give a plug again for the essential behavior. So we actually did a lot of the detective work of what makes creative teams, regardless of whether or not they're at IDEO. We get the kind of blessing of IDEO of having our values that we expect to be very in line with what is fostered within a creative culture. Well, we recognize that not every client shares the same values we have. So we've kind of found the middle ground for that, to look at the team level and start to ask, well, what are the essential beliefs and behaviors of creative teams? What are the ways people need to act? And what do they need to believe? So plug for lesson 2. I won't spoil any of those. Gotta make you want to go watch the video. And then
one of the things that comes up, and I'm gonna go here. In all of our years at IDEO, we've worked with a lot of different organizations, and one of the common things we've heard, a concern that a lot of clients and organizations say to us is, you've heard this, I'm sure, we don't want to be the next Blockbuster. I'm going to go here for a minute, which is we don't want to be stuck with an offer or product out in the world that, as the world shifts around us, is no longer relevant. We also don't want to be in the spot where in order to innovate, we'd have to cannibalize some part of our own business. So one of the questions I asked is, what is the cost of not bringing creative behaviors and innovative behaviors into your organization? Because we know very well that disruption is coming from all these places, and more organizations are feeling it. So for example, we hear a lot from the retail sector of how much disruption is happening, and if you're not able to prototype and experiment and shift some parts of your business and take risks and approach your core business more creatively, you are at risk of just losing out. The marketplace is so disruptive. We see it in retail. My gut says we're going to see a lot of change in the financial industry.
Financial services.
Services, yes. So
automotive.
Yeah. So I think one question is, what is the cost of not bringing in more creative processes in this marketplace?
Yeah. There's a lot of great articles and literature also written about this notion of an ambidextrous organization or ambidextrous leadership. So if you're not familiar, that's worth kind of doing a little digging, and maybe we could also provide some additional resources and reading. But ambidextrous organizations are set up to do two things. One is to kind of exploit the core, for lack of a better term. So they're all about finding growth through scale and operational efficiency, but they're also set up to explore. And that's all about finding new possibilities and experimenting. And those are very different forms of leadership that's required, very different forms of incentive that's required. So as you think about how you set up your organization for that, some of it's also just making room for different teams, different factions of the organization to explore that. And this is what Netflix did.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Netflix actually split their business. So DVD actually still drives a lot of their money, and that they're still experimenting there all around operational efficiency. There's a great New York Times article about the development of the amazing arm, which allows them to pack envelopes really quickly and efficiently. And then their streaming business is all about exploring, and they're looking at the future of personalization and customization and what content is great. Different leadership, different incentives, different cultures, different ways of working.
Yep, it's wonderful. Should we move on to, we'll try this one. Megan, hi Megan. Megan Miller wants to know, how do you talk about your work as a creative leader and tell your story of success when so much of the work feels invisible and takes so long to manifest? Yes, so I have two initial thoughts on this. One is a value that we have here at IDEO that's a little bit counterintuitive, but to some organizations when you think about leadership, but it's really effective, is the good sign of a leader is turn around and see who's following them. And so one of the things we look at is we look at how much are you as a creative leader enabling others. And so it's much more about, as you become a more present or more visible creative leader, it's less about you being the one with all the answers, as we know well, but you being the one that inspires and enables others and lifts up others. And so that's one way that I think a lot of our creative leaders talk, is you will rarely hear them say things like I, you will say we. So there's a constant acknowledgement of the team, and in that process you start to see how many people that leader is touching. And that's one of my favorite ways of telling a story as a leader is where am I enabling others? It's less about me and what I'm doing for others. Yeah. And it's a hard shift though, but it's a really valuable one.
It's true. And I feel you on the invisibility. It reminds me of, I had a great conversation with Claudia Kochka, who's also featured in the course. She's former head of innovation at Procter & Gamble. And when she was assembling her team of designers and people working under her, she mentioned to them, like, your job is to go out and design and do your best work, and my job is to help you when you get stuck. So you come to me when you get stuck, and she saw a lot of her mandate was to break barriers and get the organization to kind of clear the decks for these designers to do their work. And so some of it's a little bit of a different reframe of what it means to do your work. And one other tiny, this is kind of more of a personal advice, is I also take a fairly selfish lens with that. So as much as I'm working through others and enabling others, I always need a project of my own that I'm so excited to dig in personally as a designer to make sure I'm fueled. So I don't know if that's so much about telling the story of your success, but people know when you're lit up and engaged, and some of that is a way to balance that.
I also, one last thing is, I learned this from Brendan Boyle, who is one of our partners here at IDEO and runs a toy lab and instructs our From Ideas to Action course. And he talks about strategically how you, within your pipeline of all the projects that you touch as a leader, you intentionally choose a few that you pulse up and share, but you don't share everything at once. So you have your own story pipeline, so to speak, of things that are happening, but you always have some things in the background that you may or may not promote that story at a different time. And I do like, and so I love that. I love that thoughtfulness of when and how you want to tell your stories, and that you have your own story pipeline.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. I need to use that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
We're still learning too.
We're still learning, exactly. We're looking up at some other questions. And again, thank you. We are so delighted to have all of you here. And we welcome and encourage this discussion to continue on the platform as well. So if there's something that any of you want to contribute to help provide content to some of these questions, please let's continue it on the platform as well in the question queue around the live office hours. Because I know many of you here are creative leaders and have some great strategies and tips and insights to offer each other. So please do. We would love to hear more about that. And with that, we have time for 2 more questions, and then we'll start to wrap it up. Do you see one that looks?
I think we did 7 already. We could do 8, or we'll go up to some of the ones coming in. 2 strong leaders.
And again, thank you, Suresh and Scott and
what about
Atticus?
Suresh, can empathy be evangelized in a team? Which I think yeah, go. That's a great question. Okay. Maybe have.
I'm all about empathy. So for many years, I was the global design director for insights and research and empathy. And yes, but to me, the thing, to evangelize empathy in a team, you have to feel it. It's not something you can just talk about and convince people of. You have to create, I really believe in, and what are you doing, what can you do to encourage or actually enable people to have more empathic experiences? Where in your process, in your moment, can you get people to shift their perspective? And by doing something, by interviewing someone, observing, doing something out of your comfort zone. Our colleague at SY Partners, Keith Yamashita, talks about how important it is, especially as we all have our shortcuts for how we see the world to get things done. You have to actively shift your perspective. So for your team, the best way to do that and to empathize is to create moments where you're experiencing something new, and you can't talk about it. You have to do it. You need to do it, and that's your most effective way to evangelize is
through doing.
Yeah,
it's the word evangelize is
the tricky word.
You have to actually be more subversive and intentional about your experiences you have together. And I think, this sounds really silly, but I can think about being on many a design team and us referencing back to, we were in Sandy's living room in Oklahoma when she said this, and that was a game changer. And enough so that story and that emotion kind of spread through the team. Doesn't mean all of us were, maybe just a couple of us were in there, but that was the story we brought back. When I teach a bunch of empathy and need finding at Stanford, the D school, and we always ask people after you go out and do an experience or an interview, like, what surprised you?
Yeah.
What were the contradictions you saw? And what is that one story you can't wait to go home and tell your spouse or your colleague about? Those are those stories where you don't need to evangelize it because everyone's felt it. And so that would be, I guess, the best advice for how to proceed on that one.
And it doesn't have to be a huge investment.
No. I think it can sound bigger, especially if that's not a habit that you or your organization take on of let's go to the supermarket and look in an analogous aisle.
Yeah.
We're doing food. Let's go see what's happening in beauty.
Yeah.
Those are small moments that you'd be surprised, especially if that's not normal cadence, that can really help inspire a team and stoke empathy.
Yeah. I'm gonna end. I want to end with number 6.
Okay.
We'll go back to where things began because it ties directly into the course and this idea of using curiosity. So from Rob, and I see several of you upvoted this, how do you course correct design directors, design decisions your team makes without swooping and pooping on their ideas? So I love this question because, so on one hand, you as a creative leader, you can see when a team or a decision is off track or not as strong as it can be. And so that is an absolute reality. And so one of the questions is, how do you, your goal as a creative leader is to inspire a new direction with, and so it's not about rejecting or creating, diminishing what's taken place, but your goal is to inspire a new direction. So one of the things I do when I'm in this situation where I'm in a moment where I can tell something's not quite right, is I do exactly, and I learned this from Tim, I lead with curiosity. So I start by, I ask questions that help me understand, how the team got there, and then I use questions to strategically start to get them to think in a different direction about what it could be. So for example, I had one team not too long ago that we were doing a design review and there were some things, it just wasn't good. And I knew it wasn't good. And so my question to them was, I've told Em this story, is this what you intended? Is this the best of what you intended it to be? And that by itself, there was sure enough, there was a designer in the room. She's like, well, I really think it could be stronger here. And she took on the critique and enabled for the team to think through how it could be better. And so she just needed that. She needed someone to unlock what the team intuitively felt. And it wasn't me, it came, but I fostered that conversation to happen, but I didn't give the solution.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we'll get into more of this in the third lesson of how do you guide alongside through experimentation, because it also begs the question of how present are you along the journey. But in some of these moments where I see the work not quite where it needs to be, in addition to asking all those questions, is I might just join them and say, hey, let's all grab big blank sheets of paper. I love 11 by 17 paper. And let's all let's all spend 20 minutes alone thinking through our heads of what do we think the answer is to this other question? Or how might we make this a little bit more improved or a little more seamless? And then after 20 minutes, we all share, including myself, what do we think, let's compare. And we use that as a way to discuss, where are we? What does this suggest? What's missing? So there's something about, and it's a pretty small investment. It's fun. You get to big paper draw. What do you think the answer is? What is the challenge you're after? And I think that really changes the tenor of the team from swoop and poop to okay, you've helped me get to a place I didn't quite know. Or maybe teams often actually know it's not quite right.
Yeah.
Or they just need a little help moving along.
I also like last tip, because there are realities where sometimes it isn't good and the team is either conflicted or there's controversy within the team about which way to go. So one thing I'll do is I'll bring in a third point of view that's trusted by everyone in the team. So either a consumer voice, so back to your idea, what would Sally think about this idea? Or I'll bring in another trusted leader from outside the team to just evaluate the work and give because sometimes you need to create that distance and that new voice in a review of the work. Yeah. And with that,
fantastic.
We're out of time. Thank you all for being here. I know for some of you it may be really late, and we've always enjoyed our time with you. Some reminders about the course. One, we would love to continue the conversation on the platform. As I mentioned, we know many of you have wonderful insights and advice, and part of what we love about this course is the opportunity to cross-share amongst each other and learn from each other. So please jump in on some of these questions. And the first assignments are due tomorrow. Again, these are soft deadlines, but we do recommend you follow the guide, the suggested dates, so you can continue to benefit from the conversations as they unfold, because we will keep moving forward on the content and there's good stuff ahead. So anything else?
Great, thanks, Em.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day. This was fun.
Yeah, bye.